Emma sat in her car, staring blankly at the eviction notice lying on the passenger seat. The words were almost blurry from how often she had read them. Her hands trembled slightly as she ran her fingers along the paper's edges, trying to process the reality of it all. Everything had gone wrong lately, one thing after another. She had lost her job, her grandmother, and now, she was about to lose her home. It felt like the world was against her, like every piece of her life had started falling apart. The car was parked outside her grandmother's old house, where she had grown up. The windows were covered in grime, and the garden was overgrown. It used to be full of bright flowers, roses, daisies, and sunflowers. Her grandmother had spent hours tending to them, talking to Emma as they worked side by side in the sun. Those were some of Emma's happiest memories. She could almost hear her grandmother's voice now, so gentle and full of warmth. "No storm lasts forever, sweetheart. After the storm, the flowers bloom even brighter." Emma blinked back her tears, her hands clenching around the steering wheel. She wished she could believe those words. But right now, everything felt hopeless. Her job had been her stability, her way of keeping things together after her grandmother passed away. When she lost it, it felt like she had lost the last piece of herself. She picked up her phone, hesitating for a moment before unlocking it. The screen lit up with a picture of her and her grandmother in the garden. They were both smiling, their hands covered in dirt, with bright yellow sunflowers in the background. Emma had always loved sunflowers, the way they stood tall, no matter what, always turning their faces to the sun. Her grandmother had once told her, "The sunflowers know that no matter how long the rain lasts, the sun will always return." Emma took a deep breath, her chest feeling heavy. She scrolled through her messages, not sure what she was looking for. She wasn't ready to call anyone. It was too humiliating to admit that she couldn't handle things on her own. But then, her eyes stopped on a message from her best friend Claire, sent months ago. "I'm always here, Em. Whatever you need, whenever you need it." Emma closed her eyes, the weight in her chest shifting slightly. Maybe she hadn't failed. Maybe it was okay to need help sometimes. She had been trying so hard to keep everything together, to be strong for herself, but maybe she didn't have to do it alone. With a shaky sigh, she picked up the eviction notice, smoothing out its crumpled edges. She started her car and drove, not knowing where she was going. She just needed to move, to get away from the sadness that was closing in on her. She thought of her grandmother's garden again, the way the sunflowers had always seemed so full of life, no matter what. As she passed a small park, Emma noticed a group of children running around, their laughter echoing in the cool evening air. One of the kids, a little boy, stumbled and fell, scraping his knee. He cried out in pain, his face scrunching up in tears. But before long, a girl, maybe his sister, ran over to him. She knelt down beside him, brushing the dirt off his knee, and smiled. "You're okay?" she said softly. The boy sniffled, his tears slowly turning into a shy smile. Then, the girl pulled him up, and they ran after the other kids again, their laughter returning. Emma watched them, her eyes growing misty. She realized that life was like that. Sometimes, we fall and scrape our knees. But we don't have to stay down. There are always people who can help lift us back up. Emma had fallen, yes, but she wasn't alone. She could choose to stay on the ground, or she could reach out her hand and let someone help her stand up again. She didn't know where else to go, so she found herself driving towards Claire's house. Her heart pounded as she pulled up in front of the small brick home. She almost didn't get out of the car. She almost turned around and drove away, pretending that everything was fine. But she knew that wasn't true. She needed help, and that was okay. Emma took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she knocked on the door. She waited, her heart beating loudly in her ears. After what felt like an eternity, the door opened, and Claire stood there, her eyes widening in surprise. "Emma! What are you doing here?" Claire asked, her voice full of warmth and concern. Emma bit her lip, trying to keep her tears in check. But it was too much. She felt the weight of everything that had happened crashing down on her, and before she knew it, she was crying. "I need help, Claire," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm losing my apartment, and I don't know what to do." Claire's eyes softened, and without a moment's hesitation, she pulled Emma into a tight hug. "You don't have to do it alone, Em," she whispered. "We'll figure it out together." For the first time in what felt like forever, Emma felt a flicker of hope. She knew her problems wouldn't disappear overnight. There were still so many things she had to figure out. But she didn't have to do it alone. She had Claire, and maybe that was enough. That night, they sat on Claire's couch, cups of tea in their hands, as they made plans for what to do next. Claire wrote down ideas on a notepad, people Emma could call, places she could look for a new job. And they even talked about the possibility of Emma staying with Claire for a while, just until she got back on her feet. Emma felt something shift inside her as they talked. The storm was still there, but now, she could see a sliver of sunlight breaking through the clouds. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give her hope. Later, as they sat in comfortable silence, Claire spoke up. "You know, Em, you remind me of those sunflowers you used to love so much. No matter what, you always find a way to look towards the light." Emma smiled, her eyes welling up again, but this time with gratitude. "I don't feel like a sunflower right now," she admitted, her voice quiet. Claire reached over, taking Emma's hand. "You are. Even when things get tough, you find a way to keep going. You are stronger than you think." Emma looked down at their joined hands, her heart swelling with emotion. Maybe Claire was right. Maybe she was stronger than she had given herself credit for. She had faced so much already, and she was still here. She had fallen, but she was getting back up, with Claire's help. In the days that followed, Emma started to see small changes. Claire helped her find a new job, nothing fancy, but enough to get by. She moved in with Claire, setting up a small corner of the spare room with her few belongings. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Every morning, Claire would make them both coffee, and they would sit together, talking about their plans for the day. Emma found herself looking forward to those quiet moments, the warmth of the coffee in her hands, the sound of Claire's laughter. It was a reminder that she wasn't alone, that she had someone who cared about her. One day, as they sat in the garden behind Claire's house, Emma noticed a patch of sunflowers growing along the fence. They were small, just beginning to bloom, but they stood tall, their faces turned towards the sun. Emma felt a smile spread across her face, her heart swelling with hope. She reached over, taking Claire's hand. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice full of emotion. "Thank you for being my sunflower." Claire squeezed her hand, her eyes shining. "Anytime, Em. And remember, the sun will always come back. No matter how long the storm lasts." Emma nodded, her eyes filling with tears. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would still be hard days, days when she felt like giving up. But she also knew that she had the strength to keep going, to keep looking towards the light. And as she sat there, watching the sunflowers sway gently in the breeze, she knew that no matter what happened, she would always find a way to bloom again. Even in the darkest times, there is hope. Sometimes it takes a friend to help us see the light, but it's always there, waiting for us to turn towards it.